You ever feel like the world's smiling at you just to spit in your face later? That's where I was last spring, standing in the middle of my own farm, hands dirty from planting corn that was never gonna see a harvest. I'd been up at dawn, same as always, smelling the earth, thinking the rhythm of this land was the only thing in my life I could trust. And then it hit me like a hammer, I'd been played. My son, Danny, my own blood, handed me a stack of papers, for my signature, told me it was just routine paperwork for the farm. Said it was, for estate planning. Hell, I trusted him. I'd raised the kid, changed his diapers, patched up his scraped knees, and fed him beans when the money ran out. I never thought he'd be the one grinning behind a stack of legal documents while he erased my name from the farm. Neighbors, hell, even Mildred from next door with her endless gossip, knew before I did. I saw her wagging finger and that smug little smirk she always gets when she's got dirt on someone. She leaned over the fence that afternoon. I saw Danny moving the tractors into that auction yard, she whispered like it was a secret confession. Figured he was just being helpful. Helpful? Sure, Mildred, if helpful means stealing a man's life out from under him. I sat down on the porch, and my hands shook, not from age, not from fatigue, but from rage so quiet it felt like it would consume me if I let it. My wife had passed 5 years ago, leaving me to fend for both the farm and a son who, apparently, had learned greed faster than gratitude. And then it hit me, the plan. Oh, it hit me, all right. If Danny thought this was over, he was dead wrong. I didn't just inherit this land from my father, I inherited a mind that knows a thing or two about patience and strategy. I had resources he didn't even imagine. Connections he had dismissed because he never believed a man like me could play his own game. But I won't lie, this wasn't going to be easy. I already knew I'd have to be clever, meticulous. Danny was smart, slippery, and greedy, and there were a lot of moving pieces, his creditors, my neighbors, even family members who'd been quietly feeding his ego and hate. Every small mistake on my part could ruin everything. And I had already made one big one today, underestimating my own son. So, I made my first move. Quietly. Careful. And as I stepped back into the barn, brushing the dust off my hands, I realized, the war had begun. But what I didn't know then was that Danny wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. And desperate people do stupid things, things that could blow up right in their faces. And that's when the phone rang. That phone call, oh, it wasn't Danny. It was his lawyer. Smooth, rehearsed, the kind of voice that tries to make theft sound like paperwork. Mr. Harlan, he said, we just wanted to confirm you understand the documents you signed. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A low, bitter laugh that made the dog growl. Oh, I understand just fine, I said. Funny thing, though. I didn't exactly sign away the farm for pennies and a pat on the head. Silence. That was the first crack. I hung up and wandered out back to the tractor, half broken again, rust eating through the metal like time itself had decided to mock me. Danny had always said I was too stubborn, too proud, but I'd call it, principled. And sometimes, yeah, stubborn. Principles can be a weapon, I realized. If you know how to wield them. Later that afternoon, I ran into neighbors at the feed store. Small town life, you can't hide from anyone, and everyone smells drama like dogs smell fear. Heard about Danny, Mrs. Carver whispered, lowering her voice like she was passing state secrets. That boy's gone off the rails. Trying to sell off everything. I nodded politely, pretending to be interested in hay prices. Inside, my blood boiled. Everyone was talking about him, but no one knew about me yet. About what I could do. About the fact that I had a mind sharpened by years of farming, negotiating, and yes, a little legal tinkering. That evening, Danny called me. Finally. I didn't answer. Next day, I caught him in the barn, pretending to inspect the storage. His eyes flickered when he saw me, he knew, even if he didn't know what I knew. Hey, Dad, he said, all sugar and fake concern. Figured we could talk this out. You know, family. Family. That word nearly made me laugh out loud. Family, I said, dusting my hands, isn't supposed to lie to your face and hand you a foreclosure notice as a gift. He blustered. He begged. He tried to gaslight me, telling me I didn't understand the legalities, that the farm was out of my hands now. But here's the thing, Danny underestimated the old tricks I had tucked away. Things he never saw coming. The kind of moves you only learn if you've been watching, waiting, and surviving long enough to know the rules aren't always fair, but they're predictable. That night, I laid out the plan. Not fully, never fully. But enough to start testing the waters, poking at Danny's greed and his overconfidence. It's funny how desperation makes even the smartest people sloppy. And Danny, oh, he was sloppy. Too sloppy. By the time I climbed into bed, I was already seeing the first domino falling. And the best part? Danny had no idea it was happening. But just as I closed my eyes, a knock at the door froze me. Not loud, not aggressive. But deliberate. Someone knew I was planning something. Someone was watching. The knock at the door, it wasn't Danny. Not yet. I froze, listening to the quiet scrape of boots on the porch. Whoever it was had patience, and patience is dangerous when you're dealing with someone like me. I opened the door to find my brother, Tom, standing there. Always smiling like he knows a secret no one else does. But his eyes told the truth, he wasn't here for a friendly chat. "Evening, Hank," he said casually, though his tone carried a weight I hadn't heard in years. "Mind if I come in?" I let him. Family, right? Old grudges and all that. But the moment he stepped in, I smelled the faint trace of whiskey on his breath. That, I thought, was a clue. Tom was deep in something, maybe helping Danny, maybe hoping to profit off it. "I hear about the farm," he said slowly, circling the kitchen table. "Terrible business, what your son pulled. But, well, you know, times are hard. People make choices." I slammed my hand on the table. "Choices? He stole my life, Tom. And you're helping him. Admit it." He flinched, then laughed, a sound that grated like a rusty hinge. "Helping? Maybe. Maybe not. It's complicated. You ever think maybe Danny's desperate? Debts, poor decisions, he's drowning." He reached out for a lifeline. I could see it then, Tom wasn't trying to justify, he was testing me. Seeing how far my temper would go, how easy it would be to manipulate me. I wanted to hit him, but I didn't. Patience. Always patience. We ended up in the barn, me, him, and the ghosts of memories that smelled like hay and rust. While we argued, I noticed something, Danny's old ledger, half hidden in a pile of feed sacks. Debt records, payments missed, threats from creditors. The boy wasn't just greedy, he was in trouble, drowning faster than anyone realized. A plan began to take shape. Not a simple revenge. No, that wouldn't be enough. This had to be meticulous. Psychological. Clever. I could leverage his desperation. His overconfidence. And maybe even Tom's weakness. Later that night, I walked the fields under the moonlight, thinking. Corn whispered in the wind. Tractor tires pressed deep into mud. The land itself seemed to whisper reminders, patience, timing, observation. The farm had survived storms, floods, even fire. And it would survive Danny, too. But then I heard it, a faint crack of a window somewhere down by the shed. Someone was watching. Someone knew more than I thought. And as I crouched in the shadows, I realized this wasn't just Danny anymore. This was bigger. Someone else was moving pieces on the board, someone who might be closer than I wanted to admit. By the time dawn crept over the fields, I had a plan forming in my head, small, precise, and just nasty enough to sting without revealing my full hand. Danny thought he had me cornered, but the thing about underestimating an old man with a lifetime on the land, it's a mistake you only get to make once. I started with something simple, information. Everyone in this town has ears, but not everyone has a mind. I called up Mrs. Carver under the guise of needing advice about tractor repairs. "Heard some folks are eyeing the farm," I said innocently. "Do you think I should?" She spilled more than I expected. Danny had been bragging to the local feed supplier about a secret deal that could bail him out, and apparently, he wasn't subtle. Information is power. That was my first small advantage. Next, I went after Danny's confidence. I walked by the auction yard where he had stashed my tractors, feigning casual curiosity. One of the workers greeted me politely, mentioning Danny had signed the papers himself, no worries. I smiled. Let him believe he was untouchable. Every cocky grin, every careless decision, would be another crack in the dam. That evening, Danny showed up at the farmhouse, swaggering like he owned the place. "Dad," he said, "I figured we could talk again. Make things amicable. I don't want this to get ugly." I poured him a cup of coffee, watching him fidget with the handle. "Ugly's already happened," I said, calm as the dawn. "I just haven't made it messy, yet." Danny laughed nervously, then leaned in. "You don't understand. I'm in deep here. Creditors breathing down my neck, the bank, you know I'm trying to fix this." "Trying to fix it," I echoed. "Funny, that's exactly what I'm doing too." I didn't tell him that my first move was already in motion, a discreet call to one of Danny's creditors, planting a seed of doubt about his ability to pay. Nothing drastic, just enough to make him sweat. Watching his face tighten, seeing the first flickers of panic, was like tasting revenge before it was fully baked. After he left, I walked the fields again, this time noticing the small things, the broken fence post by the creek, the tractor tracks that didn't belong, even the neighbor kids running through the weeds. Every small detail mattered. Every detail was a thread I could pull to unravel Danny's overconfidence. But as I climbed the porch steps, I saw something that made my stomach twist. The ledger was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. Someone had moved it. Someone had been inside my house while I was plotting. The missing ledger hit me like a punch to the gut. That wasn't just a book, it was the key to understanding exactly how far Danny had dug himself into debt, who was involved, and how I could turn his desperation into leverage. And now it was gone. I retraced my steps, checking the barn, the tool shed, even the old chicken coop. Nothing. Whoever took it knew what they were doing. That meant two things: Danny wasn't the only one moving pieces, and someone close, maybe even inside this house, was keeping secrets. I remembered Tom. My brother. His smirk, the smell of whiskey, the vague explanations. I didn't trust him as far as I could throw him, which isn't far at all at 72 with arthritis in your knees. And yet, I had to play this smart. Confrontation without information was suicide. That night, I sat on the porch, listening to the crickets and the whisper of the wind through the cornstalks. The land had a way of speaking if you paid attention. And it whispered two truths: patience and observation were my allies, and Danny had already underestimated me. Again. Next day, I started digging into Tom. Not literally, though sometimes I wished I could, but by asking questions, subtle ones. Old friends, past business associates, even Mildred, who knew everything about everyone. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. Tom had debts, gambling issues, and a taste for Danny's money. The ledger wasn't just missing, it was likely leverage for a hidden agenda. Meanwhile, Danny's panic was becoming tangible. I ran into him at the feed store. He tried to mask it, but I could smell it, like sweat and cheap cologne. "Dad," he said, voice tight, "things are complicated. You know I'm trying to fix this." "Trying?" I asked, tilting my head. "Funny, you don't look like you're trying. You look like you're running out of time." His face twitched. "Little tells like that, they're gold in a chess game." I smiled inwardly, pretending to scan the sacks of feed. Every slip, every twitch, every lie told me more than 1,000 words could. By evening, I had a plan, a subtle scare tactic for Danny, and a way to see who else was involved. I left a note, anonymous, of course, about the missing ledger being found in a place only a family member could access. The trick? Whoever moved it would have to reveal themselves if they were greedy or sloppy. Hours later, I watched from the barn's edge as Tom sneaked through the back gate, eyes darting like a rat in a maze. He picked up the ledger, flipped it open, muttered under his breath, and didn't notice me crouched in the shadows. That's when I realized the full extent of it. Danny's betrayal was only the surface. The real danger, and opportunity, was the tangled web of family greed and desperation. And if I played this right, I could make every one of them pay for underestimating me. But as I retreated into the shadows, I heard the unmistakable sound of another vehicle approaching the farm. Tires crunching gravel. And something in my gut told me this visitor wasn't here to admire the corn. The gravel crunched like doom itself as the car rolled up the driveway. My gut clenched. Whoever it was, they weren't here for pleasantries. I slipped behind the barn, watching shadows stretch across the field, every instinct honed over decades kicking in. It was Danny. Alone, or so I thought. He stepped out of the car, a briefcase in hand, and his phone pressed to his ear like a lifeline. He muttered things under his breath, numbers, names, threats. I realized then, this was bigger than me, bigger than the farm, bigger than pride. He was tangled in debts, loans, and promises that didn't belong to him but threatened to drag me under if I didn't act. I decided it was time. Not a reckless charge, no, patience was still my weapon, but a move that would force him into panic while giving me control. I let a little rumor slip the next morning. Casual, like conversation over the fence. I heard a few creditors are getting nervous about Danny's paperwork. Weird, huh? Mrs. Carver overheard it. Word spread fast. By noon, Danny was pacing the barnyard like a cornered fox. And that's when I struck, not physically, but psychologically. I left the ledger in plain sight inside the old tool shed, deliberately forgotten. Then I waited. By evening, Danny was in a fury, tearing through the shed like a man possessed. I could hear his muttered curses, see him sweat through the window. Every page he flipped, every frantic calculation, fed my quiet satisfaction. The ledger exposed his lies, his debts, and his desperation. The neat little empire he thought he was building, crumbling in his hands. But here's the cruel twist, Danny didn't know I had made a copy of every page. Every number, every name, every signature. And as he realized that his secrets were now potentially traceable back to him, panic turned to recklessness. Then the unexpected hit, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "We know what you're doing. Stop, or someone gets hurt." I froze. Someone else knew, someone outside the family, but dangerously close. It meant two things: 1, I wasn't the only one playing chess; 2, I couldn't afford mistakes. Yet despite the warning, I smiled. The trap was working. Danny was unraveling exactly how I wanted him to. Greed, panic, secrecy, they were like puppet strings, and he was dancing without realizing who held them. But as I stepped back into the barn to think, I noticed the first real sign that I had underestimated the consequences of my own revenge. Something small, but enough to remind me that even the best laid plans can bite you in the ass. The barn door had been unlocked. The unlocked barn door was the kind of thing that makes a man's stomach drop. I froze mid-step, listening to the soft scuff of boots on the dirt floor. Whoever had been here knew more than I thought, and they weren't trying to hide it. It was Danny. But not alone. Behind him, in the shadows, moved a figure I didn't recognize at first, a man in a cheap suit, glancing nervously at the tractors like they were ticking time bombs. Debt collector. Or worse. My instincts screamed both. Danny's grin faltered when he saw me watching. "Dad. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, but his eyes darted to the man, fear sparking behind his usual cockiness. "Doesn't look like what?" I asked, calm as a cat stalking a mouse. "Looks like trouble. Looks like desperation. Looks like you finally got yourself cornered." The collector stepped forward, voice low and threatening. "We need that ledger, Mr. Harlan. Or Danny pays the consequences." I blinked slowly. Interesting. Danny hadn't told me the whole story. And suddenly, the stakes weren't just pride, they were real, tangible, and dangerous. That night, I lay awake thinking. My revenge was working, yes, but it had attracted predators. Danny's debts, his mistakes, even his lies, were now tools in someone else's hands. I could feel the air thick with potential disaster, but also opportunity. The right move could turn this entire threat into fuel for my plan. Next morning, I started with subtle sabotage. I accidentally misdirected the debt collector to an empty field, leaving Danny exposed and anxious. Then I whispered a few carefully chosen words to the neighbors, rumors of secret sales and hidden money. Every move amplified Danny's panic and frayed nerves. Danny began cracking under pressure. First small things, forgetting meetings, losing track of his calls, slipping up when he thought no one was watching. Then bigger mistakes, showing his hand to Tom, who immediately tried to exploit it for his own gain. The family was tearing itself apart, and I was just sitting back, letting it unfold like a storm over the cornfields. But just as the chaos reached its peak, I realized something terrifying. The outside man, the collector, wasn't just here for debt. He was here for revenge of his own. And if I miscalculated, my clever little traps could backfire, endangering not just the farm, but me. I knew then that the next move had to be bold. No more small games. No more testing. The storm was coming, and I was going to have to meet it head-on. I never liked surprises. The kind that make your gut tighten and your blood run cold. And yet, here it was, a debt collector, or whatever he really was, leaning against my barn, staring like he owned the place. Danny was nowhere to be seen. He'd slinked off, probably calling for backup or crying into his phone. Pathetic. I stepped out, calm as a man who's done this before. "You must be the famous Mr. Harris," I said. "I've been expecting something. Not you, exactly, but trouble in general." Harris didn't flinch. "Not yet." He pulled out a folder, thick with papers. "Ledger's fake," he said. "Danny thinks he's playing games. But he owes. Big. And you've been helping him hide it." I smiled faintly, a little cruelly. "Ledger's fake? Maybe. Or maybe it's just a mirror showing everyone their true colors. Ever think of that?" Harris raised an eyebrow. "That was my cue. Years ago, long before I became a quiet farmer, I had learned how to read a man, bend a situation, and manipulate outcomes in ways no one saw coming. Military discipline, legal loopholes, negotiation tricks, I kept them buried, thinking the land would keep me busy enough. But they weren't gone. They were waiting. And Harris had walked right into the wrong barn. I offered him a chair. "Sit," I said. "Let's talk about this, like civilized men. Or we can do it like the last people who tried to strong-arm me." He didn't sit. Smart. But not smart enough. I led him through the barn, subtly showing him areas he might think were valuable: tractors, equipment, papers. Each step, carefully orchestrated, revealed nothing of value but gave him the illusion he was seeing the whole picture. Meanwhile, my real trap had already been set: a network of local contacts, neighbors, friends, even one of Danny's shady lenders, had been prepped to watch, listen, and record everything Harris and Danny were doing. By the time Harris realized he'd been lured, I had every leverage I needed. I wasn't just defending the farm, I was turning his greed against him. Danny's panic, Tom's scheming, and Harris's threats all converged into one neat package of leverage. And then I dropped the line they never saw coming. "You're going to leave this farm, go back to your bosses, and tell them their money isn't owed. Or, everything you've said, everything you've done, goes public." Harris's jaw tightened. He was clever, but not invincible. And he underestimated me, as everyone had. As he drove away, grumbling, I felt a surge of vindication, but I also knew the war wasn't over. Danny was still loose, Tom was still meddling, and the ledger. That was just the first layer of the puzzle. Then I saw it, a message on my phone. From Danny. 4 words. "We're not done, Dad." Danny didn't just get angry, he got dangerous. I watched from the porch as he stormed around the fields, yelling into his phone like a man possessed. Every slip, every reckless move, was another thread I could pull. By now, the whole family was tangled in the mess: Tom scheming, neighbors gossiping, even Mildred watching with a smirk that said she knew more than she should. I had spent decades learning patience, discipline, and observation. Every misstep Danny made, I catalogued. The ledger, the debts, the deals he'd tried to hide, all now my tools. I didn't need brute force, I needed precision. And Danny, oh, he was handing me precision on a silver platter. That evening, I invited both Danny and Tom to the farmhouse. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I simply placed the ledger on the table, thick with notes, copies, and annotations. Their eyes widened, just the way I'd hoped. "Family," I said, calm, letting the silence stretch. "We've all made mistakes. Secrets, lies, bad decisions. But this ends tonight." Danny tried to talk, to twist, to plead. Tom tried to interject, thinking he could manipulate me. But I held their gaze. Every lie, every slip, every hidden agenda they had been hiding, it was all laid bare. I revealed Harris's visit, the debts, and the way I had turned every threat into leverage. The ledger, the neighbors, even their own greed, they had built the scaffold of their own undoing. Danny's face went pale as he realized the precariousness of his situation. Tom stuttered, trying to negotiate, only to realize he was negotiating with someone who had already calculated every outcome. And then I delivered the final blow, the deed to the farm. I didn't burn it. I didn't sell it. I returned it to the rightful owner, me. I made sure Danny and Tom knew every misstep they had taken, every moment they had underestimated me. And the best part? The town knew too. Reputation, priceless. They sat there, defeated. Not physically harmed, not humiliated in a public scene, but psychologically dismantled. They had gambled, and I had played them like chess pieces. But as I watched them leave, a small, lingering thought crept in: revenge is never clean. Even now, even victorious, I felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of lost trust, the shadow of anger that would never fully fade. And just as I began to relax, I noticed something at the edge of the fields, a figure watching from the tree-line. Someone new. Or maybe someone I had overlooked all along. The figure in the tree-line didn't move. Just stood there, watching the farmhouse, the fields, me. At first, I thought it was a neighbor. Curiosity kills in small towns, but as I squinted against the fading sun, recognition hit me like a hammer. It was Harris. The debt collector. Or, more accurately, the man who thought he could strong-arm my son and take the farm by proxy. He had returned, thinking maybe a second try would work. Foolish. Desperate. And dangerous. I didn't panic. Not anymore. I had prepared for this. Years of farming, years of strategy, years of observing human greed, it all converged here. I walked to the edge of the field, slowly, deliberately, letting him see me. Calm, collected, unshakable. "Back again?" I said. "Didn't learn the first time." Harris's jaw tightened. "You can't protect him forever. You can't protect yourself forever. This farm, it's not yours." I smiled, a small, dark smile. "The farm? Maybe. But the land isn't about ownership, it's about knowledge, patience, and persistence. 3 things you clearly lack." By now, Danny and Tom had followed, slinking behind, unsure whether to intervene or hide. I didn't need them. I never did. I revealed my final move. Every move I had made, the ledger, the whispers, the psychological traps, was part of a larger plan. I had quietly secured legal documentation, notarized witnesses, even hidden recordings of Harris pressuring Danny. I had turned every threat, every deception, every ounce of greed against them. Harris realized too late that he had walked into a trap, carefully layered, orchestrated by someone who knew not just the land, but the people who tread upon it. He tried to bluff, to threaten, to intimidate, but I had him exposed on every front. The law, the community, even his own bosses would now see the truth. Danny and Tom watched, speechless. Their desperation turned to despair. And then I did something unexpected. I offered them a choice. Walk away, admit their mistakes, or face consequences they hadn't even imagined. They left. Not humiliated, not broken physically, but the weight of betrayal, exposure, and their own greed crushed them in ways that words could barely capture. I stood alone on the porch as night fell, breathing in the scent of earth, hay, and freedom. The farm was mine, not just because of deeds and law, but because I had played the long game, outsmarted every obstacle, and turned betrayal into a lesson no one would forget. And yet, I smiled quietly to myself, a dark humor lingering in my chest. Revenge had been sweet, but imperfect. Flaws remained, scars remained. And maybe, Deep down, that was the only thing that made it truly satisfying. I walked the fields one last time before bed. Corn rustled in the wind. Crickets sang. The land was quiet, patient, eternal. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since my son's betrayal: peace. The farm had survived. I had survived. And in the end, everyone who doubted me, or underestimated me, had learned the same lesson: never bet against a man who knows the ground he walks on.